introduce to you the, part of why we're here today, the speaker for this evening. David is a research lead at Infotech here, and he leads emerging trends, innovation, IT strategy, and digital transformation. He's previously worked as a foresight strategist at Idea Couture, one of the world's leading innovation consulting firms, and honed in on his analytic capabilities through various initiatives, as well as other organizations that he has worked for. So with that, kind of further ado, David, I'd like to kind of turn things over to you. Looks like you're on the screen already, so great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for the warm introduction. And folks in Portland, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you tonight. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. And so, yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and let's get into it. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you about our 2021 Tech Trends Report and some of the insights that have come out of it. And really, what this is all focused on is what organizations can do to better adapt to change and absorb change, and ask themselves the question, how can I benefit from all the disruption that's happening right now? Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that change is going to slow down. We were on this exponential trajectory before it started, and it's likely going to continue and probably even speed up. So I've got a pop quiz for you to get us started. What do HP, GE, General Motors, IBM, Trader Joe's, Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Disney all have in common? Well, I'm not that mean. I'm not going to actually ask you this after such a long day. I'm going to give you the answer. They were all started in and around times of economic crisis. I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, never waste a good crisis, because crisis can equal opportunity. In fact, 3 out of 4 executives believe that the crisis that we are currently in right now is going to yield some significant opportunities for their organizations. So let's talk about opportunity for a second. What's been happening? Well, we're right smack in the middle of a pretty significant transition. In 2015, there were 15 billion connected devices on the planet. And by 2025, the expectation is there's going to be 75 billion connected devices on the planet. That's about 10 devices for every human being walking, talking, breathing on Earth right now. And they won't be evenly distributed, but there's going to be a lot more of them. Now, as IT leaders, you probably know that this is happening. In fact, many of you believe that your roles are going to be starting to focus, or we're going to be starting to focus on helping the business transform because of all this. In fact, we asked this question in 2019, and just about half of the IT leaders we spoke to believe that their role was going to be focused on helping the business transform. Now, we asked this question again in 2020. That answer is 93%. So everybody in one way, shape, or form, almost everyone, is involved in some type of organizational change effort using using technology. The problem is, or the challenge and opportunity is that only 6% of IT leaders think that they're ready to help the organization transform. So how do we overcome this delta? Well, the questions become, will your impact grow? Or will it shrink? Will you transform? Or will you collapse? Well, we don't want that to happen. So today we're going to talk about a set of technology trends that are going to help.
Strawberries. They were on sale and everyone bought them. I know.
Sorry, can the person speaking go on mute, please? Apologies. Thanks. So these 6 trends are going to help you adapt and absorb to disruptive change. The first 3 are really focused on how we can adjust and and really introduce something new into the market when there has been a shock or a shift. And the second three are all about how we absorb a change when it's happened. How do we absorb it into the organization? So I was just muted. Okay. We're going to talk to all of these trends, and just at a high level, they stem from how machine learning is becoming a more core component of an organization's value proposition, how non-technical developers are able to build tools, and what's happening in that domain. What are the new skills that CIOs need and IT leaders need to introduce new innovations into the market? From an absorb perspective, how do we enable a distributed workforce? How do we enhance our cloud management, our hybrid cloud efforts? And finally, how do we drive sustainability through digital technologies? Let's start with the adapt trends. Let's begin with the trends that are going to help you create this core of innovation that's continuously exploring new opportunities to diversify your business model. Starting with trend number one. Trend number one is machine learning by design, harnessing machine learning as a core piece of the organization's value proposition. There's a lot of excitement building around machine learning. It's sort of a hot topic for IT leaders, for technology leaders, and for a lot of businesses, primarily because there's a lot of hype surrounding it. We're seeing videos like this coming from Boston Dynamics, autonomous robots that are able to to do some pretty amazing things. But stuff like this, it's not really entering our day-to-day life. It's not really having a big impact in our lives just yet. I mean, there's some fringe use cases here and there where Spot, the yellow sort of pooch like robot, has been deployed to do things like bomb sniffing and to do things like crowd disbursement when dealing with I suppose social distancing and enforcing social distancing. But beyond that, we're not seeing too much of this in our day-to-day lives. What we are seeing is more interaction through technology. Now, this is a stat from a few years ago that I want to highlight for a second here. 1/3 of people surveyed 4 years ago did not know whether their last interaction, customer service interaction, was with a human being or a robot. That's 1/3 of people. Now, one can only imagine that this has increased, and perhaps it's closer to a half or closer to 2/3 now. But this is really one of the impacts we're starting to see, interacting through this layer, this can happen through solutions that I'm sure everyone's heard of, like your chatbots. Of course, many organizations are adopting machine learning capabilities to assist with some business processes, and they are ending up touching the external customer. Sometimes they're helping us automate back office processes, things like robotic process automation, of course. And now that's all great and useful. I don't want to subtract from that. But the real potential of machine learning is not going to be unlocked until it is baked into the core value proposition of what a business does. That's where the new billion-dollar business categories are going to come from. There is a wave of machine learning-driven business models on the horizon, and as this technique starts to move up the value chain, we're going to start to see the impacts grow. And what do I mean by this? Let me explain. So on the one hand, you could buy a chatbot. You could automate an aspect of your customer service interaction, and that's great. You might save a sales rep some time, and that's good. They can respond faster. Customers can get their answers faster, but this is not going to provide you with competitive differentiation. Let's say if you're a retail business, it's not going to make or break your organization. But take that and contrast that with, let's say, a machine learning algorithm that helped you identify what it is that buyers even want to buy from you. That would be a more core role for machine learning. Let's dig into an example of this. What does it look like when a machine learning algorithm is a core part of a business? Let's look at the fashion industry here. The global streetwear market makes $185 billion in sales annually, and it's growing. Okay, 185 billion in sales. But they face three key challenges. One is mass consumerism. Okay, it takes about 2,700 liters of water to make one cotton shirt. Just think about that for a second. Next, it's right-sizing the inventory. A lot of retailers, a lot of manufacturers generally have a minimum bar of making a certain amount of units. Sometimes it's upwards of 1 million units. So you're not going to make anything unless you're making 1 million units of that thing, which is crazy. And if that's a miss, if that idea is a miss, that's a lot of waste. And the third challenge is there's long product cycles. Going from idea to actually launching a product, it can take upwards of 5 months. So you can miss out on a trend. And this is where Urban Cool Lab comes in. This is a startup that has put about 2.5 years of development into artificial intelligence algorithms, which are capable of turning an influencer's brand, like a social media influencer's brand, into a viable clothing design. So they pair up an influencer with an algorithm to generate or co-create a design. Now, this company can take a new design to market on its e-commerce site in as little as 24 hours. And it makes the clothing to order, ensuring that nothing is wasted. So what is the difference here? When you bake machine learning into the core of in this case, a retail organization's value proposition, you go from 5 months product ideation to launch to 24 hours. 5 months, 24 hours. Now, that's all well and good. While startups are able to experiment with these types of value propositions, our research shows that just only about, or rather 74% of established businesses won't be able to harness machine learning for at least another 12 months. Only about a quarter feel that they can harness machine learning and apply it in a strategic way. And that's because there's some big challenges in organizations' way. They're stuck with legacy processes and legacy technology stacks. They sometimes have organizational structures that make it hard to apply AI in a meaningful way. And as a result, larger firms or established firms are typically always feeling behind the disruptive first movers. And it's going to be hard to catch up when you compound that with the scarcity of real AI talent on the job market. It seems that every skilled developer is working in advertising these days, right? They all work for Google. At least that's how it seems, right? But before we get to that, before we even get to those challenges, whose job is this? Whose job is it within an organization to lead the adoption of machine learning and AI? Has it been defined yet? Is it IT's job? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. And if it was IT's job, how would we free up the time to be able to focus on this? We've got these long project backlogs. We've got stuff that's taken up our time. Where are we going to find the time to lead this? Well, that's where trend number 2 comes in. Trend number 2 is Citizen Development 2.0. This is enabling non-technical contributors to use and create AI combined with low-code and no-code environments. Citizen Dev 2.0 is defined by non-technical workers using artificial intelligence to help build tools. Professional developers are still the ones that manipulate APIs and control the data flows, but citizen developers can now step in, and this is requiring less and less of a technical skill set, especially when it's combined with open frameworks and AI-assisted toolkits. Now, in the public sector, the use of developers outside of the organization has been prevalent for quite some time. In Toronto, there's been some volunteer civic tech groups and individuals who have helped address issues like finding bicycle parking or even transit scheduling through the release of transit data and the building of scheduling apps by citizen developers. In the cycling example, the city of Toronto, they created a crowdsourced data solution called Bike Space that allows cyclists to find parking near their location using a map. They began the effort by releasing machine-readable open data sets to their open data portal on a weekly basis. But the point I want to get across to you folks today is I know when you see the citizen dev term, you might think government, but it's not just a government thing. This has been happening in private sector enterprises as well for quite some time. We've seen that with Power Apps, Salesforce Lightning, etc. Business users have been building apps for a while now, and that's not new. But what is new is the addition of AI algorithms to their low or no code toolkits. That's new. And it's leading to some really interesting developments in some unexpected areas, like genomics, for instance. Harvard researchers recently engaged Topcoder, which is a crowdsourced community, to generate algorithms on their behalf. External contributors delivered a 976x increase to the computational speed versus the original algorithm. And they were also more accurate. The computational accuracy at first by the traditional mechanisms of the traditional researchers, they had a 76% accuracy. And with the crowdsourced algorithm, they went up to 80%. Now, looking at that 976x increase, what does that mean? How do we let me put that in terms that a human brain can understand, okay? That's going from 4 hours to 1 minute to compute a response. Okay, so accuracy went up by 4%, not frame breaking, but time to compute went down from 4 hours to 1 minute to spit out the answer. Now, Topcoder features some technical talent, but on the horizon is toolkits like GPT-3, which is a protocol from OpenAI, a consortium that I believe Elon Musk is actually one of the founding members of. Let's look at some examples of this here. We'll start with some simple stuff. So here you're seeing GPT-3 in action on a spreadsheet. It's just it's not doing anything too crazy. It's just guessing the context of the user. So it understands that the user is looking to compute what the population and what the founded date is of these different areas. I'll show that again because that was kind of fast. So Michigan, it's pulling probably from the internet, understanding the context of the selected area, and computing what the population is, pulling that probably from Wikipedia or somewhere, finding it though, and putting the information in on your behalf. And then founded date, it understands that you're looking for founded date. So this is not just A plus B plus C equals D, like a sum function. This is understanding the context of what the user is looking to accomplish. It's a different thing. Next, looking at what is the context here? Not only, let me pause here for a second. Not only does it understand that you're looking for where these people, these famous people on the left, where they work, but the algorithm has also understood that you're looking for the founders of these organizations. So Mark Zuckerberg founded Facebook, Jack Dorsey founded Twitter, Jeff Bezos founded Amazon, and Ben Horowitz, which just computed, founded Andreessen Horowitz, which is a VC firm. Another example here, pulling Twitter accounts. In this case, it knows you mean Michael B. Jordan, not the basketball player who's had some heated games with your Portland Trail Blazers in the past. But they actually mean Michael B. Jordan, the actor. So this is pretty simple functionality here. It's not going to change anyone's life. But when you take this protocol, it's being applied in different ways. It's powering other tools. And one example in particular I want to show you next, it's called Dbuild, which is a no-code tool that can be used to build web apps from just a description of what they will look like and how they work. So here, just give me a button that looks like a watermelon. Why not? Okay, it spits out what you're asking for. large text that says, welcome to my newsletter, and a blue button that says subscribe. Oh, running into a hiccup here. You have to be more specific about what the text color is. Okay, red text. And it's generating the constructs. A button for every color of the rainbow. Now, sorry, excuse me here for a second. There's one more thing I wanted to show you here, and that was this one. So in this example, the user is asking the algorithm to generate something a bit more complicated. A table of the richest countries in the world with the columns named and GDP. So it's a bit tougher, and they run into a syntax error, as you'll see next. So the user obviously knows how to code a little bit, but look at all the lines of code it just auto-generated for you. So you just go in, you find the error quickly, you change it up a couple clicks here, and then you run it, and then it generates the output. So imagine the time savings that are on the horizon here from a development perspective when you have a tool like this. Now, what are we going to do with these time savings as IT professionals, as the development requirements get pulled off of IT's plate? What are we going to do with that excess bandwidth? Well, it's not time to retire just yet. Trend number 3 is a trend we call venture architecture, which is developing and launching innovative technology ventures within IT, or from within IT. 53% of the IT professionals that we spoke to say it's very important for their organization to develop and introduce new technologies. Why? Because what was old is now new again. In 2020, the Corporate Innovation Lab was reborn. Now, diversifying business models to include digital products is a proven way to more quickly adapt to major economic shifts. All these brands either launched or rebranded their labs or launched a new tech venture from their lab. So brands like Colgate, Coca-Cola, Kroger, etc., have all either launched new labs or launched new innovative tech ventures from within their labs within 2020, a year where a lot of people were thinking this was just going to be a lost year. One example here in particular that I think is interesting is Walmart rebranded their lab to the Walmart Global Tech Lab, and they've shifted their focus to online and mobile competitiveness. Might be because of Amazon. Of course, they've been doing a lot better during the pandemic. But the most interesting example, I think, from this set of innovation lab creations actually came out of Stanley Black & Decker. So what they did is they partnered with an AI workforce training solution called DeepHow, and this was focused on a workforce upskilling program. Essentially what they did here was they captured the workflows and the tips and tricks of some of their more tenured employees, the folks that are a bit closer to retirement, who had built up a lot of corporate knowledge and understanding on how to do certain tasks. Now, all of this information is then compiled and can be curated by a machine learning algorithm based on the new employees' questions that they're asking. So if they want to understand how to do X, the platform essentially queues up a bunch of different videos that can teach them how to do something, so they can become more autonomous and work out some of these problems by themselves. It's a really cool example that shows us that a new technology venture doesn't necessarily have to be launching a new product into the market. It can be an initiative to improve employee efficiency. In this case, something that captures accumulated knowledge and uses it towards training. Think about the improvement to the employee experience that this solution would generate. Now, speaking of experience, and more so, like training and knowledge, I think there's an important question for chief information officers. I'm not sure if you folks think about this that much. I get kind of paid to think about this and understand what the differences here are. But what is the difference between a chief information officer and a chief innovation officer? What are those? What is the difference between those two things? Well, and what does a chief innovation officer have in terms of a skill set that a CIO typically does not? Well, typically, a chief innovation officer will have slightly more advanced business skills, namely around a specific area called go-to-market strategy. What is go-to-market strategy? Go-to-market strategy is all about how you intelligently bring a new product to market and how you go about doing that. In a nutshell, saying that you're going to capture 10%, let's say, of a given market, and you can apply this internally as well, 10% of your user base isn't really a strategy. Right? You might be basing that off of an example from a different industry or a different organization, but it doesn't necessarily fit your context, and it's kind of just a guess. Contrast that with what modern go-to-market strategy is all about, and this is all about finding the target niches that you're going to conquer in their totality and what order you're going to do that in. So every single business user in business unit line X within this specific geography, we're going to focus on them. We're going to get them all using this solution, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. Similarly, if you're launching a new product, all the millennial households in Southern Oregon that have 2 kids, we're going to focus on getting all of them to use this service before we move on to the next market niche. And that's really how you set that up is what go-to-market strategy is all about. And this is a skill set that we think that CIOs, chief information officers, should learn. Now, that's an opportunity. So why am I telling you all of this? What should IT do about what should they do about all this? Firstly, dealing with the machine learning uncertainty. The idea that the business, on any given day, you have that CEO coming off the plane scenario, and it's not crazy to think, well, once we get back to flying on planes, but even now, it's not crazy to think they'll ask you, what are we doing about machine learning? What are we doing about AI? Well, there's an opportunity for IT to take a construct that we're used to doing, and that's building a center of excellence in a new area that we need to rapidly increase competency in, and we think that should be focused on machine learning. What does it mean from a process standpoint? Well, from an IT process standpoint, the innovation management process needs to be focused on. This is how you essentially create a pipeline of ideas and move them through to POC or business case. Next, the challenge of all these skilled developers and sort of them all working at Google. What can we do to get around this? Well, can we apply open tactics to help access the crowd's help? Sometimes they need incentives, but it's definitely possible. The question is, how can IT build a better sandbox and empower other creators inside the organization, and sometimes outside of the organization? Of course, this can involve open data efforts. If you're in the government sector, you're probably quite used to this conversation. From an internal, enterprise or private sector perspective, it can be a bit more complex when you're dealing with data. But when you're dealing with the idea of citizen development, in either case, the question really is governance and can you easily revert to the status quo if there's been a change that's not serving you? So that's number 2, and these 2 questions are really interesting and important to think about because one must ask ourselves, could these 2 concepts or 2 trends be combined to disrupt our business? Could a new market entrant who has machine learning at the core of their value proposition that engages with the crowd in a way that you don't? Could they introduce something that you're not currently doing or deliver exponentially more value than you currently are delivering to your customers? This idea of the fear of disruption. And we're seeing this happen. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about hedge funds lately, of course, with the Robinhood stuff, and it's on everybody's mind. Are there any new GameStop billionaires on the line? I wonder, right? But quantitative hedge funds, for example, to what extent can you take historical market performance and issue a challenge to the crowd? Can you come up with an algorithm that can beat out these hedge funds? It's starting to happen. We're starting to see new startups that focus on this. And so what do you do about that? Well, it's time for the chief information officer to add some chief innovation officer skills to IT. And specifically, we think that go-to-market strategy is one of those skills that would be beneficial to learn. Let's transition to the absorb trends. The use of digital tools to renew our value proposition in a way that matches or reflects the new context of a market scenario. Now, if these first three trends kind of scared you a little bit, then you might need to consider how the next three are potential barriers or reasons why that the first three are scaring you. Let's start with trend number 4, distributed autonomous organizations, collaborating without a central hub and taking control over the workday. The pandemic that we've all been faced with, it's forced many businesses away from a centralized work hub model, and that's forced many organizations to explore new ways of working that have that present some exciting opportunities. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily ready to give up on the office entirely. In our survey, 44% of businesses say they won't be ready to operate without a central work hub for at least another 12 months, which we found quite curious. It's like we've been doing this for quite a while, but many organizations are still kind of holding on to their seats, waiting for this thing to be over so they can revert back to the way they were operating before. And a lot of them are banking on that happening because they've got certain business processes that just aren't functioning that well without the central hub. Now, to understand this trend, we can think of it as 3 A's. The first A is automation. Automated workflows are helping smooth over broken telephone scenarios in the collaboration chain. One good example of automation at work would be robotic process automation in North Tyneside. If you're looking for North Tyneside is a county government in the UK, and if you're looking for a case study where this has been applied really well, that's a really good example. They applied robotic process automation to reduce land housing benefit claims processing time by about 30%, and also increase customer satisfaction along the way. So that was a really big, important use case that they've won some awards for, and just an example of how some of this technology can be applied to automate workflows. The next is augmentation. AI is augmenting remote workers by prioritizing their workdays and at times even providing the performance evaluations that would normally come from middle management, which is really interesting. I manage a team of researchers, so I think about this sometimes as well. At Infotech, we're actually on our second AI assistant for our sales team. So our sales team can get provided feedback on how their calls are going by an algorithm. They use this tool to analyze how their interactions have played out and what they can tweak. And really what we're trying to do with stuff like that is avoid that or work around the situation that we no longer have access to, which is, if I've got a question for Richard, I can't just walk up to him and tap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, can you help me with this right quick? He might have 99 other people pinging him, and he doesn't have time for that. So how can we become more autonomous by applying this technology? That's the third A Autonomy. It's both a cultural and a technological challenge. And one thing that's really interesting that's happening here is certain organizations are starting to use emerging technologies. In particular, blockchain is playing a role in enabling more autonomy for some organizations that relied on regulatory bodies to do things like certify professional workers. Let's get into an example of this. Healthcare sector, a sector that's on the top of a lot of people's mind. Okay, the situation, of course, COVID it has posed major challenges to the healthcare sector. So many people getting sick, the demand for healthcare workers increasing, those workers facing a high risk of infection. If they get sick, they have to self-isolate, which means their colleagues are even more shorthanded. Healthcare workers, they've had a particular difficulty during this time. Beyond that, it's been difficult to get healthcare professionals certified fast enough by local health authorities. Recently, retired workers, they've been wanting to come back into the workforce to help out, and recent graduates are trying to jump into the workforce to help out, but the bureaucracy of providing the right credentials has been too slow. Enter ProCredX. ProCredX is a startup that has a solution for this. With a blockchain platform that it has developed, they've created a marketplace for verified credentials that can give hospitals autonomy in verifying workers. Once a worker's credentials are added to the secure and verifiable platform, you don't need to go back to the authorities. You can just hire them with confidence. Hospitals can also sell the credentials that they verified for the workers. ProCredX's platform, this isn't just theoretical. It's being used today by National Government Services, Spectrum Health, WellCare, and Accenture. And as of November 2020, it had completed more than 200 million credential verifications. 200 million credential verifications. Think about how much more resilient we are thanks to this one solution. And we need to be resilient because, of course, disruption can come from anywhere. In fact, we asked IT professionals where they think disruption is going to come from next. And whether it was customers changing their minds about the product because of the new context has just changed the needs, and what you sell is no longer relevant. So could it be that? Could it be a new player entering the market with something unique that doesn't end run around your offering? It's no longer as shiny as it once was. Maybe an established competitor obtains a better market position because they've figured the market out. They've moved faster than you. But what you folks actually think, by and large, is the next disruption that you're worried about. It's going to come from this sort of government, regulatory, and potentially security related area. This is the area or region of disruption that IT leaders are worried about. And it's also where trend number 5 comes in. Trend number 5 is about the self-sovereign cloud. This is the balancing of the capabilities of the public cloud with the control and privacy of on-premise infrastructure. 47% of the IT folk that we spoke to are worried that new government regulations are going to impact their cloud strategies. Of course, they've seen CCPA, they've seen GDPR, all the four-letter acronyms you can think of. But new regulations, it's on our radar. We're worried about how it's going to impact our cloud strategy. That's one thing. Another thing, from a security perspective, IP theft specifically is another big area of concern. According to Deloitte, 64% of organizations believe that IP theft will increase over the next year. And in particular, this concern is highest in the power and utilities industry, where they believe, or upwards of 70% of them believe that IP theft is going to rise. So thank you so much, IoT, for that. All the endpoint proliferation there. So what can be done about this? What do we do about this? Here's an example of an organization we feel like you should pay attention to. They're called Aptum. Aptum hosts infrastructure for an international base of clients, and we can learn a lot about how they manage infrastructure. Okay, they found that during the pandemic, they had very different effects on their infrastructure requirements because they had this international customer base. For example, and also pan industry. So for example, retail customers, they had to scale up their cloud infrastructure because they were doing much more e-commerce. But they also had customers in the tourism industry that just couldn't conduct business whatsoever. So they needed to retract from the cloud without shutting down operations entirely. On top of the performance issue, there's the regulators that they need to worry about. Recent developments in government data regulation, they've created more uncertainty in terms of compliance. Now at present, 9 of the world's largest economies have data residency requirements, and we expect that more governments will introduce regulations in 2021. To assist customers in strategically deploying cloud workloads, what Aptum has done is they provided a cloud management platform with a machine learning capability. This can help their customer organizations. It can help them conduct forensics on workloads and forecast outcomes in terms of value and cost. It also provides recommendations to users on how best to optimize their workloads. And customers can understand where their data is geographically and automatically apply policy sets to maintain compliance. What's this all about? What is having a self-sovereign cloud all about? What this means is maintaining maximum control over your cloud infrastructure. Hybrid cloud has become the agreed upon ideal model for IT infrastructure for a few years now. But recent events are drawing focus to the areas where an additional degree of control is required. And there's 3 key aspects we feel that organizations need to consider. From the bottom left, optimizing infrastructure, balancing cost with performance. We've talked about that a little bit. Next is having true end-to-end encryption, including while the data is being processed. And finally, control over data residency, meeting new data sovereignty requirements in various jurisdictions. And as the example I just spoke about showed, we're starting to see cloud management platforms that are using AI to make recommendations about where to run workloads because of all the change that we're currently facing and the added complexity associated with it. Now, in terms of regulation, there is one area that IT professionals should probably start paying more attention to. And that is the disruption that will likely come from from climate regulation. In particular, the one that's on the top of everybody's mind is the Paris Climate Accord. Biden took office just about 20 days ago. So we're 2/3 into this 30-day window. So there's about 10 more days to figure out exactly what this looks like. So there's going to be some type of announcement probably quite soon. And what it's supposed to look like is, of course, the U.S. has committed to re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. And what that commitment is supposed to look like is upwards of a 30% reduction in industrial emissions by 2030. So that is what the commitment would be if all goes as it sort of is supposed to. And that's where our final trend comes in. It's another opportunity here to add value through technology. Trend number 6 is digital sustainability, using digital technologies such as software and machine learning to drive emission reduction and cost efficiency at the same time. Now, I was having a conversation recently with a group of internal stakeholders, and I asked the question, over the past 10 years, if you look at the past 10 years, what do we think the increase in VC investment has been into climate-related technologies? What has been the increase over the past decade into that domain? Now, the highest number that I heard was 300%. 300% increase over the past decade is the highest number that I heard. And that's a high number. That's a lot of investment. That's a lot of increase into an area. But the number the number actually is 3,750%. It's a factor of magnitude more than what people assume is happening here. This is the largest area of technology investment, period, full stop, more than anything else, more than in any individual area like AI, definitely more than blockchain. This is where there's such a significant amount of investment into climate-related technologies. It's like a new sector is being created. Now, over and above the Paris Agreement, through the UN, we also have this global goal of net neutral carbon emissions by 2050. And IT, this is something that we don't necessarily acknowledge that much, but I've seen stats that would indicate upwards of 10% of the world's emissions come from the electricity used just to move data. So we have a part in this. We're making an impact on this. But on the flip side, there's also a lot of opportunity to use digital technologies to help industries reduce their footprint. AI, IoT, and 5G, these are all technologies that will be part of this. They're actually helping reduce the amount of electricity that we consume. They're helping us move our grids towards more carbon-free, renewable energy sources, and they may even help us capture carbon in power plants and in the atmosphere. It's definitely something that is on Microsoft's radar. Microsoft has committed to becoming a carbon negative company, which means that not only will it cease creating carbon emissions based on its own business, but it's also going to erase its historical emissions by offsetting more than it creates by the year 2050. And with Azure cloud computing a growing part of its business, you might wonder how it's going to achieve that. They're actually shifting to 100% renewable power supply by 2025. And Microsoft, they wanted to be able to more easily communicate the carbon reduction benefits to their customers and show them how it's investing in renewable energy. And so to address this, they've actually launched the sustainability calculator, which through which customers can compare how workloads in their own data center stack up against transmitting data to Azure and running it in the cloud. This calculator estimates the greenhouse gas emissions in metric tons, and it can help customers save costs when operating in a jurisdiction that enforces a carbon tax, like Canada, for example. It's a tool that helps you become smarter about your emissions, which, whether you use this or something else, it's something that we think you're going to probably have to do pretty soon. Another example of a big hitter making an impact in this space would be Google. Google applied their DeepMind machine learning algorithm to reduce their data center cooling costs by 40%. Imagine what the price tag is to cool the Google data centers and being able to reduce that cost by 40%. That's really a career-making endeavor. Imagine if you were to do the same thing for your organizations, being able to add that to your resume as something, and really being able to help deliver on this key benefit, which is building trust with your organization stakeholders. Trust is really the currency of our times, and this is becoming a big part of the impact that people are expecting from brands. So what do you do about this? How can you absorb these changes? Well, first, collaboration is a good place to start. I mean, we're working across geographies, and this is definitely a challenging thing to do. So what's the plan to sustain this for the near term and midterm? What's our digital workforce strategy? Next, with the increasingly dynamic regulatory environment, we might need more than back of the napkin calculations. Can we use AI-assisted operations to better manage our cloud environment? And finally, is it time for IT to accept some accountability for carbon impact, or get ahead of that expectation? Now, we're starting to see signals that organizations are starting to commit to at least reporting on or getting an understanding and then reporting on what their impact is from a climate perspective. Now, to conclude, I know this has been a trends talk, and folks, I really appreciate your patience listening to this. It's been a discussion on emerging technologies that can make your enterprise more capable of thriving through change. This idea of becoming more regenerative. How do we take change and become better as a result? And so the questions to ask ourselves as we absorb all this information is, from a people perspective, how can we apply these technologies to our human capital and become more self-sufficient? From a process perspective, how can we bake innovation and progress into what we do? And finally, from a technology perspective, how can we modernize the engine that runs the organization? This is the challenge that we currently face. And to get us started, I'm going to summarize this all into one call to action for you, one piece of homework for you, and I'll give you a timeline by the end of February. Try to have an answer for this question. In what scenarios could you apply these technologies to deliver on some of these human benefits that we've been talking about today? To what extent could you apply these technologies to make a positive impact in somebody's life, whether they work for you or whether they don't? To what extent can you apply these technologies to help your organization bounce back when something bad has happened, or better yet, avoid bad things from happening? And finally, how can you apply these technologies to build and maintain trust between your organization and its partners? Folks, thank you so much. I would love to make some room for any questions that you might have for me tonight.
Thanks, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Just coming up with thanks so very much indeed for your presentation. Yes, Pradeep, how would we can do questions? We want to take them on the chat, or?
Yeah, yes. In fact, they can unmute the microphone right away. So we'll ask people to unmute and ask the questions.
Or what you do have, or you should have, I believe on your participant screen, is there a raising hand feature? I can't
it's
see.
not available in this format.
Okay.
Pradeep, it's under the reactions. Under the reactions, there's a raise hand.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Was it thumbs up or?
Yeah. So is anybody out there for questions? Kind of a quiet crowd today. Okay.
I think we have one question. I'm sure it's a question or comment from Bob around the term Citizen Dev 2.0, and that seems a little confusing. If it maybe tuned more to government, but can you comment a little bit more about that description?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's one of those terms that there's definitely some confusion around. It's like the term customer in the IT world. Whenever you bring that term up, it's like, well, what customer are you talking about? Are you talking about the business customer? Are you talking about the end customer, the person that's doing business with the organization, or who are we talking about here? So it's sort of similar to that, at least in the different ways it's being used. But citizen developer is not exclusive to a government context. It basically means anyone who is building tools in an organization that does not come from a development background, is not working in IT in that organization. And so, like, the question is how can you create this sort of sandbox environment so that business users can build tools, and how can you channel that, and what should the governance be around that? And that's sort of the questions to ask oneself there. And how can you empower people to solve problems themselves by building a tool that can help them do their job better, or does it always have to be you? it's an interesting sort of spectrum to consider there. So Bob, I hope I answered your question there. It doesn't just mean government.
So thanks for that. And I have a question from John Boone. You mentioned GPT Playground. Can you share how to find that?
Yeah. So there's quite a bit of discourse on it. I would look at the website for OpenAI. OpenAI is the developer of that protocol, and they're the ones that are sort of pushing it. And that was a consortium that Elon Musk has started, and it's all about the democratization of AI. Essentially, is the ethos of that organization. Yeah, OpenAI. Look out for that, and you'd be able to find more information on GPT-3.